Hello, and welcome to A Year at the Movies with me, Jacob Earl. The show where I try and watch a movie every day of the year, and then at the end of every week, I talk to you about it. This is episode 3 of Less Than 52 because I took January off. We're still operating at a deficit. I'm at 31 movies watched this year, and this is day 41, so we're currently at a deficit of 10, which is very doable. Let's see. If you haven't seen the show before, it's just me talking. I try and edit it as little as possible. Let's see. Let's start with the first movie that we saw this week, 1968's Targets by Peter Bogdanovich, a movie about the end of Boris Karloff's career, sort of. Boris Karloff plays an aging horror actor who is at the end of his career. He's right on the verge of making his last movie, but people want him to continue, and Peter Bogdanovich actually plays a writer who he thinks he's got a great new picture out for Boris, or the fictionalized version of Boris, which I think is funny because he never reads the script, but it seems like it's the movie that we're watching. While all this is going on in a B story, it's very much organized in a back at the ranch sort of fashion. There's another storyline about this psycho killer, this guy who just snaps one day and decides to go around shooting people, and the sort of terrifying randomness of that, like Boris Karloff's character and Boris Karloff himself, because this is, I believe, Boris Karloff's final picture. He feels like he doesn't have a place anymore in a world of, mass shootings, which I didn't realize we were doing in 1968, but Vietnam mass shootings. What's the point of a monster, a guy dressed up in a monster outfit to scare you or whatever? And eventually the stories intersect, but not before this guy gets away with a lot. And I think he gets away with it because he's so unassuming looking. He's very Leave It to Beaver. He's very white, but he's basically in a perfect blue-eyed serial killer look to him. Also, thinking about JFK and all that kind of thing. Let's see. In Targets, they reference an earlier picture of Boris Karloff's The Criminal Code, which I could not find a copy of. I couldn't find it to rent or watch anywhere, so I watched it on the Internet Archive, where they had a pretty rough DVD copy of it available. 1930, Howard Hawks. But that one was also interesting. The Criminal Code 1930 was also interesting because there's the two conflicting ideas of what prisons should be and why people should be in them, and it was a surprisingly anti-prison movie for 1930. You would think that the further back in the past you went, the more the people would be in favor of capital punishment. But the Criminal Code was actually, to me, surprisingly anti-incarceration. But the plot line of it, basically this sort of handsome criminal gets put in jail for a thing that he the charges are trumped up or whatever, and he falls in love with the maiden of the prison. The guy who runs the prison is eventually brought into the picture more, and then his daughter's pretty and they fall in love. But the things that these prisoners do are not things that I would traditionally think of as prison activities. Like, they do manufacturing, but it's not of like printing out license plates. It's making rope out of jute, and it's like really harmful to them because of the particulates and whatever. And the way that they're treated is basically inhumane. And the good prison administrator who comes in, who has the pretty daughter, he's more heroic and more honest and whatever, and so he's like trying to change the way that it works. And Boris Karloff's character is very he's a prisoner who's been there for a long time and has an axe to grind, and he's more in the idea that of selfishness and whatever, and capital punishment. Let's see. In love with the warden's daughter. The things that the prisoner activities that they do, I think of, well, first of all, there's a whole like prison labor is the modern slavery thing, which I was not expecting to see in a movie from 1930, but it's very much in the criminal code. It feels like what it feels like is like a what do you call them? A plantation romance, like a thing set in the Reconstruction South, where but for that to map 1-to-1, the maiden of the prison would have to fall in love with a slave, and that obviously can't work because it's 1930. It's a movie in 1930. I think it's pre-code, but it's like that still wouldn't have flown. So it's like the romances are all very like between. There appears to only be white people in this prison, which I thought was also interesting. And they're given all, but the reason that it feels like a plantation movie is that they are given all of these jobs for the warden and his family. They clean the warden's house, they drive his car, they pick his daughter up from the train station. Like, they do all of these jobs that if this was a movie set in the slave-owning South would make a lot more sense. But instead they're just like regular inmates doing all of these jobs, which would seem more out of line with reality, except, this still happens. Like, prison labor is still currently being used as essentially slave labor. Like, it's a way to get around the anti-slavery amendment. But that's, there's a lot of themes in this week that are a little bit not quite outside of my purview, but a little too complicated for me to speak confidently on. Where I know I have my ideas about what's happening, but I don't have like an article that I can source, Jesus, we're only on the second one. Riki-Oh, the story of Ricky. This is only loosely related to the previous one because it's set in a prison, but it's about this, similarly, it's about this guy who goes to prison, but he's a kung fu maniac, basically. Like, he's unkillable, he's super strong, and he just cuts through the villainy and oppression of the private prison industrial complex, which is really fun. It's from 1991, and it feels very much like those parody movies that people would make of like themes, like what was it, Police Story or whatever. Not Police Story, but flying parody, like how do I describe this? Like he has hammer space pockets. What's that flying one where it's like, don't call me Shirley? Oh my god. Classic good bad. Hell's a girl. Yeah, in the dystopian future where there are private prisons. I'll think of it in a second, as long as I stop thinking about it. But you know how there used to be that whole rash of movies that are parodies of a like a concept. And Riki-Oh, the story of Ricky, feels like one of those, like a scary movie or an Airplane, is what I was trying to think of, but about the idea of, like a Hong Kong cinema, like, kung fu movie, where he goes around and he literally, like, fights people, and then he gets to their leader, and the leaders are literally called bosses. It felt very much like a video game, but super gory and crazy and over the top, and it was a lot of fun. Just the reddest, most clearly paint gore that you've ever seen. Like, completely inventive, like, off-the-wall, zany, is the only way I can describe it. The whole movie of Riki-Oh, the story of Ricky, was zany. It was like House, that movie House, about the girls who go to the house that is evil. It was a lot like that, where it's just like it keeps going up and up and up and up, and you're like, there's no way it can get any crazier than this, and it does. It's really a lot of fun. Not for the week of Constitution, though, despite it being all pretty goofy. Let's see. Going back onto the theme of, the next movie I watched was Cane Toads, An Unnatural History from 1988, which is a documentary about the cane toad infestation in Australia that was created in the 30s by Australian scientists who had this problem with bugs, these grubs eating all the sugar. So they went to Hawaii, and got these toads and introduced them into an environment where they had no natural predators and a huge amount of space to go in. Cane toads have this like toxin, this like numbing toxin that kills small animals and is bad for people. You can dilute it into, or distill it into a drug, apparently. But they're cute as hell, these cane toads, especially when they're like little pollywogs. Strictly cute as hell. But it was the thing that I felt like made it relevant to this series was how it interacted, this'll come up in a second, but how imperialism destroyed the landscape. Like, people, like white outsiders who came to Australia from England and whatever, thinking that they know everything, are like, we'll go get some, we have some bugs, we'll get some frogs eat bugs. The frogs do not eat the bugs. I mean, to spoil the movie, I guess. There's all kinds of different opinions about it, and the documentary Cane Toads, An Unnatural History by Mark Lewis is not on the toads' side. Like, it feels to me like, here is a problem, and here's some people who think that we should keep the toads, and here's some people who think that we shouldn't, but like, the evidence that it lays out is very subtly anti these toxic toads. I wrote down classic 1930s plan. I bet toads eat grubs. They do not. Interesting note from my friend Sasha, who I watched the movie with. At one point, to commemorate the King and Queen of England getting married, some scientists and people from Australia were like, what's a thing that we can do? And they bound a book in the skin of one of these cane toads, which are themselves colonizing and destroying the landscape, and then sent them to the king and the queen, which I didn't even catch when we watched it, and is pretty funny. A lot of pictures of toads. Okay. I'm just gonna skip past it, but I also rewatched Looper, but because it's a rewatch, I'm not really trying to make it work with the theme here. Talking about colonialism destroying the environment. Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese, 2023. In 2021, I was in Oklahoma with my dad because we were, I think, coming back from visiting my Grammy, who lives in Tennessee. And we stopped in this airport. My dad is a private pilot, and we landed in Oklahoma. And talked to the guy who was just standing there to help us. He was bringing the fuel over. A lot of places you can just pull your plane up to fuel it, but a surprising amount of places that think they're fancy don't let you do self-serve stuff. And this particular airport was built by the Phillips Petroleum Corporation, or whatever, Phillips Oil. And it used to be a big corporate hub, and so there isn't as much like self-serve stuff available. Although it was a ghost town, it was wiped out. But we were talking to this fellow there, and he was talking about how lucky it was that this airport existed and that it was as big as it was, because it had recently gotten a lot of use. Because I can't remember how he pronounced the name, but he had clearly never heard of Martin Scorsese before. He said, because that director, Martin Scorsese, or Martin Scorsese, maybe, something like that, some completely wild and original take on the name Scorsese. Which I don't understand how you can be a person alive and have never heard Martin Scorsese's name said out loud before. But, I guess if you live in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Yeah. Let's double check my math on that. Bartlesville is in Oklahoma, right? Yeah. This is my diary from the time. I was trying to see if I had written down how this guy said Scorsese. It doesn't matter. But he said this director, Martin Scorsese, is filming something based off of a book that somebody wrote a couple of years ago about the Osage, or something like that. I wish I had what he said on tape. It was really quite unique in the way that he framed everything. But that was quite surprising to me, because, you don't expect to hear that Martin Scorsese's in the same little random small town as you. I didn't meet him. I didn't meet any of these people. We just sort of walked around and looked at stuff, and it was a ghost town. This part of the world had become a big built-up town on the back of the oil that was found on the native reservation, and then it ran out basically at a certain point, and everything is just, it was like spooky. It was empty. I noted that I saw a real lack of dead birds, which because on an earlier trip through this same period in Lubbock, Texas, I think, there were dead birds just everywhere, which didn't make me feel real confident about walking around. But not in Oklahoma. But the thing about Bartlesville is that it is the like corporate headquarters of Phillips, which in its iteration as I think Phillips 66, and then ConocoPhillips employed my dad for 40 years. Maybe more than that. Certainly well before I was born, and well into my adulthood. He worked as an engineer for them in Alaska, and keeping oil fields running, basically. Keeping things turning, right? Round things. Thinking about statistics, and not statistics, but like spreadsheets and numbers and whatever. Fairly complex work that I barely understand. And so we went to the little museum there in Bartlesville about the like founding of the Phillips Oil Corporation, something I'd never really thought about before. And there was all of this paraphernalia, I guess, of like different promotional items that Phillips had produced over the years, models of offshore oil rigs, all kinds of things. And there was one frame there, and I've printed it out here so I can reference it, but I'll maybe put it up on screen if I remember. Piece of information about the original oil well, their first significant oil discovery, it says, and how that happened. The way that it's framed in this is very propagandistic, but if you read between the lines here, they discovered oil in 1905 in the Osage Hills west of Bartlesville, on land owned by an 8-year-old girl named Anna Davis, who is Native American, and her name of Davis is later on because she got married. But she wasn't. It says here, Anna Anderson, maybe that's what her name started out as, received large royalty payments for the oil produced from the land she leased to the Phillips brothers. At one point, she was known as the richest little Native American girl in Oklahoma. Editing. However, her small fortune brought restrictions as well as privileges. She was instructed to always inform her guardians of her whereabouts, because people were concerned about her getting kidnapped, and for a time, Frank Phillips served as her guardian, which means that they were leasing land to themselves through this woman's name, essentially. It seems to me, based off of just this little piece of paper and a short Medium article that I read, and I'll link, that they were very lucky, and they weren't necessarily worried about kidnapping. They were worried about, I don't know, like, it's just gross as hell. And that's kind of what Killers of the Flower Moon is about. Not kind of, it's quite literally what it's about. Because in Killers of the Flower Moon, there are all of these people, largely Native American women, who have technical ownership of their land, and they call them allotments, but like that's what a lot is. Like if you ever have a house and it's on like a 3-acre lot or whatever, that's shortening the word allotment. They controlled all of this area, and they were leasing it to people, and people would get oil off of it and then pay some, like, I don't think they were buying the oil from the Native Americans, but they were like paying a tax on it essentially to the local Osage Native American population. And that tax was then held in not exactly held in escrow, but like held where they couldn't quite get to it. And that's unless they were like a man or married. And the easiest way to get to that money was to marry a white man, because at this time the only real people were white men in the eyes of the bank. Basically, like, women can't have bank accounts, and people who aren't white generally can't have bank accounts. I think that because this was on a reservation and not on federal, it was like technically only sort of in America as far as regulations go. There might have been some gray area, but it seemed like and there were a lot of rich Native Americans in this movie, which is based very much in historical fact, but the richest people were the sort of ancillary Phillips brothers types who were marrying these women and controlling their stake through frankly, through patriarchy. And the stake, I mean, I'm talking out of my ass here, so the stake appears to have been transferred through a matrilineal line. So that makes it hard for it to be, it theoretically makes it harder for the white man to steal it, but not impossible. Certainly not impossible. And Killers of the Flower Moon is about a series of murders that took place over this interwar time period when oil suddenly became valuable. And, what happened then. It's a good movie. I mean, it's kind of didactic, but I think that it was worth seeing for sure. And not just because it's like on the list of movies that are up for the Oscars, but like it's a good movie. I think that a good distillation of it is why is this white supremacy happening? Capitalism. Who's doing it? Men. Just because of the bell hooks thing, and I'm pointing to where I have it pinned on the wall, of how imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, basically, that's her kind of, to my mind, a little bit of an awkward phrase, but that is a good distillation of why so many bad things seem to happen. But yeah, I have been thinking a lot lately about how my entire life arises from that one sin of stealing a child's fortune, 100 years ago. Anyway, and then I watched Vice, which is a movie from 2018 by Adam McKay. It is a biopic. Don't watch it. It's bad. Let's see. We're almost out of next week, I think I'm going to try and watch Anatomy of a Fall. I'm also going to try and work on watching some more Oscars contenders, and especially the ones in cinematography and editing, because that's the sort of things I think about all the time. And I'll see you then. Yeah. Check out the Patreon. All right, right on the dot.